Perfect. Hi there. I am Esther McMorris. I am Chief Executive and founder of 9 Feet Tall. We specialise in delivering complex change, and cultural change is a big element of that. We work with a range of clients, some very large corporates, the likes of Aon, Dixon's Carphone, but also with smaller firms and charities such as the Brandon Trust and Gloucestershire Cricket Club. So we've got all sorts of experience. And we're going to be talking about transforming organisational culture today. A survey's gone out prior to this, so thank you for those of you that have completed it. We've had a really good response rate and picked up some key trends which we will be discussing. I think one of the interesting things that came out of it was the focus around the startup. So how do you really start initiatives around culture? So we will be exploring that in more detail with our lovely panel today. So in terms of the panel, unfortunately, we've had Becky Norman had to drop out last minute due to COVID. She's editor of HR Zone. But we do have our other panelists here who will be able to answer the questions and provide insight required. So maybe if we go around the table just in terms of introductions. So Alice Stephenson, so do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Alice Stephenson. I'm the founder and CEO of Stephenson Law, which is a UK regulated law firm. I actually live in Amsterdam, but my business is in the UK and my team work remotely. Prior to becoming a lawyer, I actually worked in HR. I was a CIPD qualified HR professional. Then I transitioned over to law. Spent a bit of time working in sort of traditional private practice and realized that really wasn't for me. So I started Stephenson Law 5 years ago, and now we are a team of 40 people. We specialize in working with fast growth technology businesses, and we're purpose driven. We're a purpose driven business, and our purpose is all about empowering lawyers to challenge the status quo. So we're very much sort of trying to break down a lot of the stereotypes and barriers that exist within the legal industry.
Interesting. Yeah, and it'd be great to hear more about that today and your journey, as you say, to challenge that status quo, and how do you do things differently, and in particular I think in that legal sector, which is traditionally it's got its ways of working, hasn't it? So and then we've got Arjen Cooper-Rolfe as Chief Exec of Involvement. Did you want to introduce yourself, Arjen?
Yeah, hi everyone. Arjen Cooper-Rolfe. As Esther said, CEO of a company called Involvement. It was a family business set up in the 70s, initially specialising in selling and distributing industrial packaging to the UK manufacturing sector, but has since diversified into other areas, including third-party storage and distribution, even IT services as well. So I also have a confession, if I can say that. I never wanted to be the CEO of this business. I was working in London in the commercial property market for many years, very happily. But about 10 years ago, everything in my life changed. I lost both my parents and my brother in a short space of time. So at that time, it felt like I had an obligation to take on the business. It's not something that I ever really wanted to do, but I was the only one left. If I can say that. But having done that, having taken on the reins, I said to myself that I wasn't going to just let this business tick along. And we have gone through an amazing transformation of what was a well-run, but a very traditional family-run business into I would say, hopefully a great example of a purpose and values-led business, which has also generated amazing results for its people and the performance of the business as well. So we're about 80 to 90 people spread out around various distribution centres across the UK.
Yeah, and again, a very interesting journey, and I guess similar to Alice is changing that culture from, I guess, where it was family-led and family-owned into something far more commercial and purpose-led. Also a fellow Dutch person, Arjen, and we've got Alice from Amsterdam, so yes. It's nice to have that tinge to it today as well. And then finally we've got Tiki Partner at 9 Feet Tall. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm the odd one out, so I don't have a Dutch connection, unfortunately. I wish I did. So I've been working with Esther probably for about 11, 12 years now. 9 Feet Tall as a company is about just coming up for 20 years old. So I'm a partner in the business. So I go out and I work with organisations of different shapes and sizes, helping executive teams to think about cultural transformation and other large-scale transformation programs. And then I also look after the people side of 9 Feet Tall. So it's a bit like being a chef, isn't it? So you go out there and you tell everybody else, or you teach everyone else what to do, and then you have to actually do it yourself. And we've been through quite a transition, particularly through COVID. So if you think normally we work with clients, so we've always traditionally gone and worked on site with clients, and suddenly COVID changed all of that. So over the last couple of years, we've been through a real journey and a change in what it means to work at 9 Feet Tall and be part of our company. So I'll talk a bit more about that later, but that's my background.
And I'm sure Tiggy will tell us all about the culture club that she's established at 9 Feet Tall. So I
love a bit of 80s pop, yes. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, let's get started. I guess maybe Tiggy, we'll start with you actually. When we talk about organisational culture, it can be interpreted in quite different ways. What do you think it means, and you know, how would you explain what organisational culture is?
I suppose it's like the personality of the organisation, really, isn't it? It's the way things are done. At the heart of it, I suppose it's the beliefs that people have who work within the organisation. It's the values, it's the assumptions that we make, and all that kind of comes together to form a unique sort of social and psychological environment that we operate in. And I think also it then determines what our employees or potential employees and our customers and the general public think about us, and what makes us different from other organisations, I suppose.
Yeah. And I guess it's the beliefs and the ways of working. It's also, I think if you look at a recent paper from Forbes, it's linked to profit. So I think the research showed that you're 4 times more likely to grow your revenue if you do have a strong culture. Arjen, maybe if I can switch to you, does that ring true for you? Do you think culture and performance are closely interlinked?
Yeah, it will be no surprise that I totally endorse that. For me, it starts with your people, because one thing we've certainly learned in the last couple of years is that profit doesn't come to your rescue in a crisis. It's your people that come to your rescue. And I would say that anyone thinking about connecting or reconnecting their business or their organisation with their purpose or their values is going to be on the right track. And we did it over 10 years ago, and incredible things have happened. We've outperformed our competitors. We've improved all our colleague engagement scores, all our customer feedback measures. We've retained our best people. We've gone on a remarkable run of business awards and recognition as well, and ultimately that has fed through to improved performance of the business. When I took over, it was a business that some years made a profit, some years didn't make a profit, but we've never performed so well, and that's, I believe, is fundamentally linked to our reconnecting the organisation with its purpose and its values. So yeah, I'm a very strong advocate of this, albeit it takes, the only caveat I would say is it does take quite a lot of time and a lot of effort, actually. And I would say there's probably not a huge number of shortcuts to this if you want to do it properly. But I would say it's a win for my colleagues and a win for the business. Win-win.
Yeah. How do you convince your shareholders, though, that you prioritise people over profit, perhaps, in particular when it's a family-owned business, you know, where profits are important? How did you tackle that involvement?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, when I started introducing these ideas, it was quite new for people. Very, very new. It was like I'd blown up the company. You know, when I was saying things, you know, the purpose of this business isn't to make a profit. That's what will happen, but that's not why we're here. That's not we're here for very, very different reasons. And I just think it takes time and talking through, listening to people, showing people how, showing people what you mean is so important. Yeah, so we spent a lot of time, invested a lot of time in the beginning in bringing people together, talking people through it, and also giving them tools and showing them what we meant by a purpose and values led culture.
Yeah, and I guess, Alice, Stephenson Law, because it's your baby, you set it up yourself. Did you set it out in terms of purpose and people, or was profit always one of your kind of key drivers as well? Oh, you're on mute.
I mean, obviously, when you start a business, you want to start making profit as quickly as possible. That is quite important, but it was always, you know, I started my business for a reason. I started my business because it was either that or I was going to leave the legal industry altogether. This was it was a very personal decision for me. I didn't start my business because I wanted to make money. So I think, you know, that's definitely impacted the way that I've approached growing the business and leading the business and growing my team right from day one, really.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess in your times, kind of coming from the legal sector as well, I'm sure you've kind of seen lots of different ways people operate. There's also in the market, there's a high level of burnout. Attrition rates are, you know, they're through the roof. Have you experienced something before setting up kind of Stephenson Law that you thought, well, actually, this is the bit I'm going to do differently?
There wasn't any one particular thing. I think it in your sort of description of what a culture is, I think, you know, typically the culture within law firms is a really toxic culture. It's not an environment that has been created to enable its employees to thrive. The way that they, you know, the way that they manage performance, the way that they reward people, all of the ways in which the partners sort of interact with their employees, in my view, is all geared to maximize the profits for the partners, and to diminish the employees that are working for them to what is really nothing more than, you know, a number on a spreadsheet. And, you know, from my experience as a junior lawyer working in private practice, and I have heard lots of stories that are far worse than mine. But, you know, I wasn't on the whole treated very well. I had children at the time. You know, I had lots of comments made about the fact that I was working part-time because I had to leave the office to go and pick my children up. There's lots of sexism that exists within these cultures as well, lots of discrimination. And I just think they're typically not places where you can just be yourself. And I wasn't really prepared to settle for something like that, for spending the rest of my career in an environment like that.
Yeah, and I think, as you say, is one of the key drivers is partner bonuses and benefits. What did that do to the actual overall performance of the firms and that you've worked for prior to Stephenson Law?
I mean, I think, you know, typically the firm's performance has always been pretty good. I can't really explain why that is the case. I think, you know, there's always going to be a demand for legal services. It's you know, it's an industry with high barriers to entry, and a lot of the law firms have been around for a very long time. They're very well positioned in the market, and lots of people want to be lawyers, so they have a constant stream of talent. So it doesn't matter if they lose people. They don't see people as irreplaceable or indispensable. They just go and hire more. So I think it's an industry that really allows businesses to behave like this and still perform well.
Okay.
Alice, can I ask you a question? Do you think, so there's a lot of firms talking about, like law firms talking about their purpose and things now. Do you think that's going to translate into anything different than what's happened before? Because there are lots of lateral hires happening and people moving around after the pandemic. So do you think that that's about to change?
I don't think it's about to change. No, I think, you know, there's a lot more smaller entrepreneurial businesses starting, and they are a lot more purpose driven, like myself. And I'm sort of really rooting for anybody looking to start their own law firm at the moment, because I think that that's going to be a really key driver for change. But I think, you know, with the larger firms, a lot of them are they're so difficult to change, and there are so many changes that need to be made at a really core level of the business. I think ultimately the partnership model is flawed. It really sort of, you know, it incentivizes this short-termist approach to maximizing profits, and it doesn't encourage investment in people, investment in technology, and investment in staff. And I think, you know, and law firms now aren't really setting themselves up as partnerships. It's becoming less and less common for that model to be adopted. But I think while that model still exists, and the, you know, the big law firms at the size that they are, I can't see any significant changes being made for a long time.
Tiki, what's your thoughts on that? Do you concur with that?
I think there's a lot more discussion around culture and employee value proposition. Definitely that's on the agenda a lot more than it used to be 5 years ago, I would say. But obviously it's then, you know, how do you actually deliver some results?
Yeah, and I guess go on, Arjen.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add a little bit, just more generally, and it may not be that there are unhealthy cultures, but it's just this whole swathe of the workforce that are just not engaged. I think the latest sort of Gallup surveys on this are saying that only 20% of employees are engaged in their work. I mean, it's pitifully low. It's pitifully low. And I think there's actually an obligation on an employer to do more. There is an obligation on employers to do more. I feel. And
I guess one of the challenges sometimes as well, and I think, you know, we work with a variety of law firms as well who are all on the journey, and maybe it takes longer, but there's definitely a realization that purpose and you know, getting the best out of the people and doing right for the people is important. There's also a matter of then, how do you measure that culture? So how do you baseline it, and how do you know that you've improved it? Tiki, have you got, I know that there's lots of different ways, and actually interestingly, I just got my survey up here. 89% of you who completed our survey said that you do have measures in place for culture. How are you finding that, Tiki? Is that across the clients you work with, the measuring of culture, is that in place and working?
I think there's one measure that's generally used, which is employee engagement. That tends to be the measure, you know, and engagement surveys are pretty much standard across most of the clients that we work with now. But that's sort of one element of it. So I think just relying on that is potentially problematic, because one, it's just a snapshot at a point in time, and two, it's depending on the way that questions are asked, you know, questions mean different things to different people. So I think there's generally a focus on engagement, and engagement is really, really important, but there are other things that actually are important as well. So, you know, thinking about, so if you're on a cultural change journey, it's like, well, what are you trying to achieve out of that? And then having measures which actually are specifically targeting what the change is. So often, you know, thinking about, well, what's the customer value that we're trying to deliver? So we've got a cultural change going on, but how does that actually end up impacting our customers or our clients if you're in professional services business, and actually measuring the change over time and what your clients or your customers are saying about, you know, the way that they interact with you as an organization. I think also that, you know, Arjen's point about results, that's really key as well. So you know, in terms of the link between behavior drives action, and actions deliver results. So actually looking at your, what are some of the outcomes you're trying to achieve from your cultural transformation, and are you actually delivering on the performance side as well? Linking all of those together to get much more of a rounded view. And another area that I think is really important is in any transformation of culture is, well, what are the decisions that are being made, and actually tracking that those decisions are being made in line with what you're saying your values are, and the direction of travel in which you want to move, and the purpose. So actually then you can measure whether you're doing what you say you're going to do, because decisions should be made in accordance with your values and the direction of travel. And if they're not, that's probably an indicator that you haven't quite got it right yet. But I think it's really important to, once you start measuring, to keep on doing that, because there's a tendency to do it once and think, okay, well, we've ticked the box. And actually it's as Arjen mentioned, it's an ongoing endeavor, isn't it? Once you started it, you can't stop. That's it. That's part of the way that you need to be interacting with, not just your employees, but your customers and other key stakeholders. So your supply chain, for instance. So there's a lot in there. And I think sometimes there's just a real focus on just employee engagement, and that's only a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Arjen, have you got kind of within your organisation, are you looking at things wider than employee engagement? Have you got any nuggets that you can share? Because clearly you're getting it right in many ways. So. Yeah,
I'll definitely focus on that link between what the customer experience is. We did quite a lot of work on that at the beginning. Where are we now? And we have been able to track that, so we know that customers are noticing. Customers notice, and the experience that they've have or get from us, it has improved. But I would also link this back to behaviours. It's very much changes. I believe long-term sustainable change. You've got to change people's behaviours, and that's quite hard. And so those are the kind of things that we focus on. It's the behaviours. These are the inputs. The outputs, I kind of think will look after themselves. It's the inputs. What do we want people to be doing around here? What will we hear them say? What will we see them do? That's what we focus on.
And it's really listening to your team, but your clients as well. And we often say that people don't want to do client listening because they might not want to hear what their clients say about them. Are you doing anything of that, Alice, yourself, in terms of, and I guess with your business that is growing rapidly, how do you get that continual feedback to measure culture, I guess, ultimately?
Yeah, I mean, so we do run an engagement survey every 3 months with the team, which is a really, really useful tool. We also, I think ultimately it's all about communication for us. We're a remote team, so having good communication is really, really important. We have an anonymous suggestion box that people can just put any ideas that they want. Everybody has a one-to-one once a month with their line manager, and we've just launched a new performance and progression framework that sort of, as we just said, ties in all the behaviours that we want to see with our purpose and with our goals as well. And then gives employees a path, because I think it's very important as part of managing the culture you have to link what the business is trying to achieve with what the individuals are trying to achieve, because they need to have a reason for being there. So it's not just about the business, growing or whatever it is. It's about, well, how is the individual going to fulfill their personal goals? And that all seems to be working pretty well for us at the moment.
I'd say, Alice, that's really important. These are just fundamentals that sort of colleagues should have. They should get feedback back on how they're doing. They should know what their short, medium, long-term goals are. They should. For me, that's just a basic requirement, that everyone should know that, and they should know how the work that they do connects into the sort of strategy of the business. So they can see the work, how the work, the work that they do every day is making a difference, is getting us all moving us all closer to those goals.
Yeah, and I guess underpinning that is trust as well. So it's making sure that, you know, people feel that they're in a safe environment, they can trust their colleagues. I'm sure you're familiar with Lencioni's high performing model, which is one of the key elements there. Tiggy, what's your thoughts on trust and why it's important, and what organisations can do to get that right?
Yeah, I think it's like the basis of everything, isn't it? So being able to have faith and trust that in the people that you work with and in the people who are trying to guide the company to success is really important. So without that, there's some stats. I think I looked up some Gallup stats. So companies with higher trust ratings have a 50% increase in productivity. It's really striking. 106% more engagement than those with low trust, 13% fewer sick days. So it's really tangible stuff. For us, I think it's about, as an employee, being able to bring your whole self to work. So Alice, you mentioned about being able to be authentic in the workplace. It's about that psychological safety. So being able to feed back and receive feedback in a way which doesn't make you feel uncomfortable or excessively vulnerable, and being able to talk and share any concerns or fears or worries in a way that is not detrimental to your career progression or to you being treated in an equal way to everyone else. So it's completely fundamental for us. And I think one of the things that we found, particularly through the Culture Club, is actually it's really important for leaders. So for me and Esther and others in 9 Feet Tall to be a bit vulnerable and to talk about when we found things difficult and where we struggled, and that kind of opens the doorway for others to be able to be open and honest and to build trust. So I think it's the role modeling. So Arjen, you were talking about that earlier. You've got to do yourself. So if you want to build a culture of trust, you've got to, one, do what you say you're going to do, and also just be human and expose some of the vulnerabilities. And I think if you do that routinely and repeatedly, that really helps others to be able to feel that they can do the same. I also think when you're bringing lots of new people in, that trust takes a little while for people to build if they've come from an environment where it's not like that. So you can say, oh, we're really open and actually we trust each other. But until somebody experiences it over and over again, it can be hard for them to believe that. And we've had that with some of our people who've joined. They said, well, you said the culture was like this, but we've just had to experience it for a while to actually believe that it's what you've said is actually the case. So I think it's just repeatedly reinforcing that and making it, fine for people to call out when they don't think that things are going in the right direction, and to be able to hear that without being defensive. Yeah.
Alice, are you similar to any other thoughts or ideas that you've got in terms of how do you improve levels of trust within your team?
Yeah, I mean, I think trust is a really big issue within my industry because it's perceived as being such a high risk area. So, typically it's very difficult for law firms to sort of put all of their trust in junior lawyers, for example, in trainee lawyers, because they don't want a mistake being made, and mistakes are seen as the absolute end of the world typically within law firms. But actually what we do is the opposite, really. We really empower all of our team, including the junior lawyers, to have as much responsibility as they feel able to take on. And we probably take a more riskier approach than most other law firms in doing that. We give our junior lawyers lots of direct client contact, and obviously they're still supervised and we still keep an eye on them, but we give them more space to do the jobs that we've hired them to do. And as a result of that, they develop so much faster than lawyers that we have seen come from other places. So I think, for us, trust is really, really important. I think if I don't have an employee that I can trust, then they're not going to be an employee for very long, to be honest. I think, it's so important to everything that we do, and it has to be a two-way process and it has to work. It's sort of a non-negotiable for us.
Yeah, and I think, we find ultimately people come to work to do a good job, so it's giving them the space to succeed and the support to succeed as well. Okay, if we move on to hybrid and flexible working, so one of our questions in the survey was around whether organisations feel that's been successful, and the scores were low. There were less than 50% of people thought the hybrid working model works. I guess there's some confusion perhaps in hybrid and flexible working. Tiki, what's your thoughts on that?
I think so for me, hybrid is about where. So, you know, where are you working? And flexible working is more about, you know, when and how. I think some of the challenges around hybrid working depends on what sort of roles you've got within the organisation, because we're all different. And I know, Arjen, when we talked before, you know, for some of your team, they can't choose where they work. They have to. Were you saying they have to drive a bus, or they have to, you know,
they have to drive a truck, or they have to
drive a truck?
Yeah,
you know. And so I think that there's a real, I think for HR in particular, there's a feeling that everything has to be equal. And I think it's being a bit brave in saying, well, there are areas where there are flexibility. And I know, Arjen, when we were talking before, you've got examples of what you can do, and understanding what is important to people. So, you know, work-life balance is different for everybody. And I'm not suggesting that if you're in an organisation of 10,000 people, you're going to be able to create a policy that's unique to each person, but you can find out what's important to them and offer a range of different options that are going to help. So I think the other thing about, you know, not many people saying it's working successfully yet, I still think it's relatively new. So for a lot of organisations, I mean, law in particular, the idea of remote working before the pandemic, most firms would have said there's no way, and you know, no way we're going to be able to make that work, and then overnight they did. So I think for a lot of organisations, remote working is a work in progress. Hybrid working, mixing hybrid working is a work in progress, and it's difficult to create that sense when some people are in the room and some people aren't, of it, you know, it being an equitable experience. So I think it's just something that we need to keep working on to make sure, because this is going to be the way forward. I don't think everybody's going to go back to working in the office.
Arjen, do you want to expand on what's happening in your camp, and I guess some of the challenges, some of the benefits that you're seeing in this space?
Yeah, I think what Tiki was saying was just absolutely right. It's very, you've got to be practical. I think there are some areas that you can be more flexible than others, but I think it's about listening to people, and I think there are definitely benefits where you can. You know, if you take some of our drivers, for example, some of them they're quite a unique bunch. Truck drivers, they some of them love just being on the road for the whole week. They don't want to see anyone for the whole week. They just want to go out on a Monday, stay out overnight, and come back on a Friday. But others don't, you know. And how can you juggle things, you know, to suit them? And there are things you can do. They like their own trucks is another good example. So we give them their own truck. No one else goes in their truck, it's their truck. Whereas a lot of haulage companies, it's just you turn up and you get handed a key. You know, it could be any truck that you're given on that day. So I think in terms of the benefits, I would say, definitely are benefits. If people see that you are going out of your way to try and make things work for them in terms of being flexible, we definitely see benefits in payback in terms of when you do need them to do something extra or stay late, or we do see that back. So I would say it's quite a selfish way at times, but it does create a slight credit in the bank account, as it were. And the only thing I would caveat it with, sometimes I think this goes a bit too far. So I would say it's still got to be a fair trade. So I think sometimes it goes a bit too far, personally. And if you feel like it's not a fair trade, and you're if the employer is always the one, or the, or the manager is the one always seem to be flexible, being flexible, trying to accommodate it, then it's probably gone too far. So I think I would add the word fair. It's got to be fair as well at the end. You know, businesses can't, at the end of the day, we've still got to get orders picked, goods to customers, and that's our purpose. So
yeah, you're still running the business at the end of the day. You know, that makes absolute sense.
But there is quite a lot of room for flexibility, and I would say we're in a reasonably good position because it's a family-owned business. It's quite small. We can do that quite well. You know.
Why, Alice? Why do you think? Because there's lots of benefits in it, clearly, and some of it's not that tricky to implement as well. Why do you think so many organisations resist the flexible working patterns?
I think it's the resistance just to change generally. I think it's a lack of trust. I think, you know, there's still some people that think if you can't see somebody working, then they're probably not working. I think there are some legitimate reasons as well. I think certainly it has become much more challenging for us to supervise and help develop our trainee lawyers, for example. Whereas before we would all be in an office and they'd sort of overhear calls, and it would be easy to kind of pull them into meetings and things like that. That has become more challenging, and we have to be a lot more intentional about how we sort of go about training and developing the junior members of the team. Yeah. But ultimately, I think it is just the fact that lots of these businesses are still paying massive office rents, and they want people to be sitting in them.
There is still that, isn't there? So there's definitely a shift to be had in certain firms. But I think, as you were saying, Arjen, I think that fair balance is probably a really good pushback as well. There's only so far. Definitely. At the end of the day, organisations are still there to service their customers, and that needs to remain at the heart of it.
I just add very quickly. I think also the reason why some organisations don't want to do it is because it's harder. It takes more effort. You've got to have people within the business who, or the leaders within the business, or those in leadership positions who know their teams well and know their people well, and that takes time and effort.
Yeah. And we talked within that quite a bit earlier as well around that empowerment is kind of giving your teams the opportunity. It links to trust. In empowerment in particular, Arjen, is there ways that involvement that you have to get the teams more involved and take ownership and accountability? Is there anything that you can share?
Yes, definitely. One thing I was very keen to change when I came in was this. It was a very command and control type environment. No decision was made without my father knowing about it, that kind of thing, and it was just slow and it was very inward looking, I would say. So empowerment is a very important theme for us. I think it's an area that we sort of struggled with initially, but I think the way we started working it through was just bringing people together and asking them what is empowerment. What does it mean to them? Why is it important? Linking it back to our values, again, just sort of asking, coming together and saying, like, what would we hear people say and see people do around empowerment, and very much connecting it back into the job satisfaction, motivation, driving creativity and innovation, and improving trust as well, actually linking back to trust as well. So we've got a number of tools that we use, but we start by it's just advice really. If you're not sure about how to start, just come together and talk about empowerment. What does it mean? How do we demonstrate empowerment in our business? What does it look like? But we've developed some tools like debrief tools, pre-mortems, how we make decisions, so decision-making processes and things like that to kind of help people along the way as well.
Yeah, and Tiggy, I guess building on that, kind of part of that is also allowing people to get it wrong sometimes, because if you empower people, they don't always get it right. have you got anything you share around kind of the fail fast principles?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting what Alice was saying about lawyers and, you know, making mistakes is like the ultimate, you know, thing that's not allowed, because I've done quite a lot of work with law firms around innovation, and that's all about trying things out and getting things wrong. I think the most important thing that we found with, you know, so we have a development scheme where our team are sort of trained in consultancy for a couple of years, and similar to you, Alice, we let people loose and let them get really good experience, and that means that sometimes they aren't going to get things right all the time. But I think the most important thing is about backing and making sure that your team is really well supported, and that you know what risks you're taking on, and you talk to the team about that. So engaging and having conversations about, well, what are we going to do if this doesn't work out, so that people can go ahead with confidence that you know what the risks are when you do these things, and you let people try, and we all understand what we're going to do if it doesn't go wrong, and also making sure that we learn the lessons when it doesn't go right, because actually the learning is the key bit to take away. So I think it's making sure that people know that they're going to be supported, whether they make a roaring success of something or whether we don't, and then we learn from it. Those are the things that have worked for us, I would say.
Okay. Thank you, Tiggy. I'm going to move over to Alice, and we started our conversation around purpose, and I'm just keen to revisit that. We're seeing lots of organisations revisiting their purpose, both in the legal sector but also in other sectors. How do you see the link between purpose and culture?
Well, I think purpose is kind of like it's almost like your North Star. It's what you're kind of working towards, and it really sort of guides all of the decisions that everybody makes within the business. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how we see it within our business. You know, if we're doing something that conflicts with our purpose, or we're thinking about doing something, then we wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So it's something that really lives and breathes within the organisation, and you know, it does with us in terms of the way that we interact with each other, the way that we support each other, the way that we market ourselves to our clients, the way that we deliver legal services to our clients. It just is integrated into everything that we do.
Mm. And I guess, Arjen, it also links to the kind of recruitment and retention. So if you got your purpose, you know, you want to make sure that your people are behind that, and also ultimately, I guess, improve retention. Have you seen that correlation?
Yeah, I mean, we've changed our recruitment processes a lot, actually, and we you know, this way of how we operate, you know, it isn't for everyone, actually, which is okay. But it's something that's extremely important to us and the people people within the business. It's something that we want to build even more, and it starts right at that recruitment phase. You know, we talk about our purpose and values. You know, we don't, you know, more in the initial stages about that than some of the practicalities of doing the job, because it's almost like, well, yeah, we're, you know, you've got the skills to do the job. This is not about that. These are some of these softer skills, and this is what we believe in. These are the things that are important to us, and it's important that we take people on who are aligned to that way of thinking from day one.
And have you done it the other way, where people aren't aligned, they don't get the job?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Or I mean, we went through a reasonable amount of churn, I would say, when we first went down this route for existing colleagues, actually. Which I, you know, I'm more than happy to be open about that. It was when we started talking in this way and reshaping the business, reconnecting it to its values and things. It wasn't for everyone, and we did have a little bit of churn, but we stuck by it. We stuck by it. Some of those people were very good, hardworking people, but they didn't, you know, they weren't quite aligned with us. So but that's just part of it. I think that is part of it.
Yeah, excellent, thank you. I guess the other confusion we sometimes get with purpose, and Tiggy, you know, kind of in your client experiences around aligning purpose and strategy, and can you have both? And the answer is probably yes, you can have both. How do organisations go about aligning their strategy with their purpose, or the other way around?
Well, I suppose I can tell you what we did. So I think, I think you need to get I don't think it's just purpose. So for me, it's like, what's your vision? Where are you trying to get to? What's your purpose and your identity? So those things that make you unique, and understanding those really well. And then what the strategy is, how you're going to get there, or, you know, take steps towards getting there. So I think you need to do it around that way. So not decide your strategy and then try and fit in your purpose. I don't think that works. So when we talked about our purpose, what we did was we talked about it as a leadership team, and what the things we were really passionate about, and then we engaged a team really quickly to see what things they, you know, what did they share in terms of their thoughts, and anything that actually didn't work for them. And our strategy is about change for good, and actually baking in capability within all of our clients, so eventually they won't need us, which is quite, you know, so you're trying to sell yourself out of work in the end. And actually, as that sort of purpose then drives a whole strategy, because you have to think about how you're going to build capability, it changes your sales process, it changes lots of different things. And so the strategy kind of fell out of that, and we decided what we were going to do about that in the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years. But the really important thing was engaging the team really early on to get their ideas, because they had so many brilliant ideas about what are the things that actually would help us to achieve that, and which are the things we should prioritize in our strategy and do first. So that's the way we've gone about it. I've worked with quite a lot of clients where they've tried to do it around the other way, and then they've had to unpick some of their strategy. So I just think it's getting the, you know, the purpose and the vision first, getting that right, and then defining your strategy after that.
Yeah, it's getting that sequence right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, just as we use a pyramid, and at the base of our pyramid is, we've got layers of our pyramid, you know, and we have our purpose and our values. They are the two fundamental things at the base of that pyramid, the things that never change. Yeah. And then we layer on the sort of strategic plans, the annual priorities and goals and things above that. And yeah, that's very much how we've done it in our business as well.
Yeah, well, confected. I see Alice nodding as well. I'm just we're nearly out of time. I just wanted to touch around the startup, which is one of the key themes that came out of the survey that's been submitted. And kind of, when do you need to start addressing cultural change, or when do you know it's not right? Alice, maybe if you got any experience where there's like signs to say, well, actually now you need to start addressing this, or give organisations or the people that are on the call today some idea as to when's a good time to intervene.
I think it's something that you have to manage intentionally right from day one, to be honest. And as soon as you stop doing that, then you will notice that things aren't quite right. You know, I haven't been through any kind of cultural change as such, but I have been through a very, very big cultural evolution within my company, when it's grown from being just me to being 40 people. And during that time, we've also transitioned to a fully remote business as well. So I think the nature of any startup is constant change and uncertainty. That just comes hand in hand with starting a business. And from a cultural perspective, you have to manage that, and you have to make sure that you've got people within your team that can cope with the level of change that working in a startup throws at you. And you have to, you know, try and manage that uncertainty. And to be honest, I mean, it's quite frankly chaotic startup life, as best you can, by sort of, you know, giving people a reason to be there. They need to be aligned and bought into your purpose and what you're doing, because startup life isn't for everybody, and it is really, really challenging. So it's just something that I have done from day one, really.
Yeah. Just in a different scenario, our situation was different, where we were already a very established business, quite a mature business, and my experience of that was kind of an instinct. It's not something that I introduced straight away. I took a little bit of time to think about it through first. But I would say it was an instinct for me, and I felt something needed to change, and this is what I want. And I didn't have all the answers, but I knew where to start. And I think, you know, for some businesses, it is a risk, because you know, in our case, the business had done reasonably well for many decades, so there was a risk, and ultimately there was no one single moment where I thought, oh yeah, that's the moment, right, I've had enough, we've got to move forward now. And you know, it evolved over time, and my experience was actually there was never a perfect time to start it. You just kind of, the odds of success were never perfect, you know, and the biggest thing we did was just to start, and take a bit of a leap of faith, take a leap of faith.
Yeah, and I think it's not just to start, isn't it? It's being brave enough to do that. Tiki, is there any tips that you have how you can get from, we know we need to do something, to, okay, well, let's know and now translate that into action?
Yeah, I think our situation was prompted by COVID, actually, and some people being furloughed, some people working right the way through, and just having really different experiences, our team having different experiences, and that creating a little bit of unrest. So we were feeling the bubbling up of that, and so we decided to address it head on, which is when we started Culture Club. So we got together as a leadership team and said, something bubbling away, do we want to do something about it? Answered by everyone was yes. And then it was a case of, right, well, let's just start talking. And that's when we formed Culture Club, and everybody in the organisation was invited to come along, and we would pick key topics to talk about openly in a forum. And then there was an agreement that we would take away suggestions and thoughts and put things into practice. And that ran for a year. And it was amazing how many people came to different things and brought different ideas. But it was a really successful but risky thing to do, because it meant everything got, you know, all topics were discussed. People were happy about some things, unhappy about others. And I think for us, we had to sort of, you know, take a deep breath and hear the things that were coming back and be open and not defensive about what we're being told, and then figure out with the team what we were going to do about it. And I think it's getting agreement that you're going to start something and putting the commitment in there that once you start it, you've got to keep on doing it. So it's sort of working out what you're going to do. And I don't think there's a perfect thing to do. It depends on your organisation and the challenges you're facing. But I think it's not just letting it drift. So when you feel that there's something that needs to be tackled, it's being brave enough to do that.
Yeah. And I guess maybe Arjen or Alice, and I guess it's sometimes, where does that responsibility lie? Because I guess, Arjen, with your business, you were kind of forced into that and given it a shake. Alice, it's your business. Do you think it's the role of the chief exec or the role of HR to kind of look at cultural change? Where does that responsibility lie? Arjen, go on. You're smiling.
I have very strong views on it. I have something I have very strong. I just took a lot of. I felt personally responsible for it myself. It's something that I've never farmed out to HR and said, right, this is what I want you to do. Go off and do it. I was very much involved in it from the start. I was the one leading the workshop sessions, the presentations, the discussions, all that sort of thing. So for me, it starts at the top and is very much something that the leadership team, the senior leadership team, needs to be on board with. Otherwise, I just don't think it should be left to HR or farmed out to them, and and sort of hands off. No, I have very strong views on that.
Yeah, fine. Alice, do you echo that?
I agree.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. We're getting quite a few questions coming in as well. So some of that we haven't had a chance to answer all of them. I weaved a few in. I also agree. I think one of the key things that we started off with around people before profits is a really interesting concept, and we will share some further collateral as well. Before we sign off, I would like to first of all thank our panelists, but give them one more opportunity to share their finest piece of advice on when it comes to organisational culture and getting that right. So one nugget. So if we can go round the table, I don't know who would like to go first. I'll start with Tiggy, shall I? So she's nodding. Oh, or not? No.
No. I think it's there's two things actually. If I can say two things.
This one.
I think for HR, it's you can really help by bringing evidence-based information to the exec. So to back up any assumptions that are being made around culture and what's going on. So that is really helpful, and to bang the drum and not let things that are, if things are bubbling away, raise them, bring them to the surface, and don't be deterred if it doesn't immediately get picked up, because actually there's a bit of tenacity required sometimes to raise things and keep raising them until something gets done about it. So I think that's the thing for me. It's like keep banging the drum and bring evidence, and hopefully you're going to get your exec team on board and bought in. If it doesn't happen straight away, just keep going.
Alice, what about you?
I think for me, it's about having your purpose and your values really, really clearly articulated and embedded across everything that you do. I that's definitely my number one tip.
Thank you. And Arjen?
Yeah, one of my tips for one of the things I experienced when we started this route was that some people were actually, well, a lot of people were really quite interested and excited, and yeah, great. This is they felt something that they were interested in, but they wanted to know what they needed to do. So what do you want me to do, Arjen? Okay, that's great. It sounds brilliant, but what do you actually want me to do? So we in response to that, we produced something called our Values Handbook. So it's I've got a copy here, which is our ninth edition. So this is just a small book about just a tool to tell people, inform people how what do we mean and how to go about doing things. And I actually say it's more important than your contract of employment. So that's how important it is in our organisation. So that's just a little tip, help people to show people how.
Make it real. Perfect. Well, I just want to say a big thank you to the panellists. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Some really useful insights, some good nuggets. The recording will be made available. We will also have a webinar that's going to be led by Tiggy, and that's going to come out in the next month or so. So please get yourself onto our social channels. If you want to have more information, just put a little thumbs up on the chat as well. So we'll make sure we'll contact you directly and separately. There's a few more questions that have come out. Again, we'll share answers onto that on those questions with you as well. So thank you again. It is definitely the power of culture. Keep that close to you, and I hope you all have a good rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Esther and Alice, Tiggy and Arjen. Thank you.